Welcome everyone to the KLAS Insights. I'm an Insights Director here at KLAS and Spotlights and First Look Reports. And Stephen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, I lead research that we conduct in emerging solutions. So we are constantly looking at innovation in the industry, and I'm dedicated to just identifying that and reporting on it.
Nice, yeah. So, technology is kind of a huge theme in healthcare, right? I mean, obviously, over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of development. Some of that due to legislation that has, kind of forced hospitals and clinics and health systems to adopt certain types of technologies. But then there's other issues. There's, we'll get into these, staffing issues that force, hospitals and clinics to look for other solutions because you can't just stop doing certain things. And then technology that helps solve problems that in ways that we never really thought we could before. So let's just talk about, what are you seeing in emerging technology in healthcare?
Yeah, I mean, we're really seeing a play off of that theme that you've highlighted generally. In healthcare, you don't necessarily have
changes. What are some of the top areas that they're looking at? There's obviously tons of different ways you can invest in software, but revenue cycle, patient intake and patient flow, security and privacy. Obviously, there's always going to be threats at security at the information, and healthcare is built on data and information, right? Patient information. You got to protect that. Clinical systems, and then telehealth, which we saw take a huge, make a huge increase and boom during the pandemic. And then, where does KLAS factor into all that? One of the key findings from that report was over half of providers are concerned about missing out on a new product, or does it work seamlessly within their workflow and make their life actually easier so that they can take care of more patients and take better care.
The trends, and I'd encourage everyone to get a copy of it. Trends that you're talking about, but also the fact that, okay, you may have a new innovative solution, but if you're going to increase the number of clicks or you're going to create inefficiency in the system or of a nurse, of an administrator, more complicated, I think adoption. A lot of creative solutions out there. But you have to balance your solution with, am I going to be is it going to be part of a platform? Am I offering a platform, or is it a point solution? And
in healthcare to solve, we want to go out and measure those solutions to see, how are they really working? And so, like I said, my job is I'm kind of the product owner for these reports that we do. We call them Emerging Solutions Spotlights or First Look Reports, where we take a solution we've never measured before. We publish a short report on that and let people know that what the customer experience is of the people using that solution. And so, while my job is to make sure that they're published, your job is
here has been, and I meet these vendors at conferences, or we talk obviously via a Teams conference or a Zoom. They're trying to solve the patient experience. So what patients want, vendors aren't necessarily delivering or providers aren't offering. And that intake, that patient flow and intake is a key point. I just completed a report for a company called ClearStep. It's a triage software, patient intake, patient flow type tool, high level of satisfaction among their customers, and they're solving a real problem. They're filling gaps where maybe there was staff before, but they're also making the experience easier to use, like you find in other industries, and think of it as bringing ride sharing to healthcare, but on a patient level. So it's just streamlined. It's 21st century. It is inferior. So it's a bolt-on or an add-on type of solution. You mentioned telehealth. I'm seeing a lot of in remote patient monitoring and new creative telehealth solutions, even diagnostic tools, where it's a combination of hardware and software that will tie into some type of a telehealth platform.
Yeah. So it's interesting, we actually had a podcast episode with Schaefer Jackson, who oversees a lot of the RPM, remote patient monitoring research we do here at KLAS. And you talked about the patient flow. So a lot of the technology is to enhance the experience of the patient, right? Make it and then make it easier to glean and gather information from them wherever they are, so that you can, providers can provide better care, provide care to more people.
Correct.
probably nip some of the problems in the bud before they become issues. If you can track someone's blood pressure from home, you can see when it starts to spike and intervene before it becomes a bigger issue.
Absolutely.
Find them, but ultimately, how do we end up deciding what reports we're going to do?
Sure. I mean, as you say, we can't cover everybody. It's the resources don't exist. Plus, it's just a lot of it is noise versus signal. So the first task we have is to figure out, is this a real solution that's delivering operational, financial, or clinical ROI or results? Yeah. And the easiest way for us to do that is if a provider comes to us and is seriously considering that vendor, and we can validate that the vendor has a number of significant customers, even if it's early stage, then there's already some adoption. That's a high priority.
Sure.
We also serve investors here at KLAS, such as private equity firms, and see about conducting a spotlight research report. I think in terms of how you prioritize, it's got to really hit some of these hot button issues that we've talked about. It's got to be something in that atmosphere, if you will, versus a tool that may not be as high a priority for our provider payer community.
Yeah. So if we're hearing about it from the provider payer community, it's going to be one that we're going to want to try to go out and chase and get.
Absolutely.
Right. And so now let's say a vendor agrees, like yeah, let's do a study with KLAS. Let's do a spotlight report. What's next in your mind? What happens from there?
Couple avenues that they can take. Again, if the interest is there, if the demand is there, and we really think it's hitting an important issue, we can complete the report complimentary. So there's no cost to the vendor, and we'll place that report on our portal to be viewed by our providers and payers and those that have access or subscription to our portal. The vendor gets quite a bit more value actually, if they sponsor the report. They can then use that report in their marketing efforts for 1 year, be it their website, conferences, social media. And they also receive a deep dive strategic engagement with us where we can give them some market analysis, best practices, give them more insight than what's just in the report. So in terms of next steps, it usually takes anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks to complete a report, depending on how responsive their clients are. But the vendor would share their client list, and we would begin the research process. And in the midst of that process, we'd give them a little early insight, 48-hour preview before it's published. And generally speaking, we find obviously there's strengths come out. And many times the product and the client success teams at the vendor really benefit from seeing this feedback. It helps them design their product roadmap or make a change or an enhancement. And then the opportunities we identify in the report. I had one vendor say, the reason we need you, KLAS, is because you measure our weakest link, and we need to know what that link is. We need to know what that is. And so taking that information and utilizing it as a vendor can only make you more competitive and create happier customers.
Yeah, and so the segments, very established companies, and there's a lot of new stuff happening in those.
Absolutely.
But then just outside of those, there are dozens and dozens of new technologies, new companies doing things that are really incredibly innovative. And as long as they can fit, like we talked about at the beginning, within the workflow of the provider or the payer, that's where they can really make a difference. And so it'll be fun to see over the next year or two as we continue to measure more and more of these, who kind of rises, who doesn't, and maybe who gets, obviously a lot of these get acquired and they merge,
That's
but
right. It'll
be fun to see what developments come from the reports that we write and all that.
Yeah, I mean,
Health Investment Symposium in Park City, and we had our first Top 20 award where we recognized, we took all of the spotlight reports that we had written from the last year and a half, had a group of provider thought leaders, so a lot of CIOs and other C-level executives at hospital organizations read these reports and rate them based on their the likelihood of them to impact in the 4 areas of the quadruple aim of healthcare. And then we recognize those vendors, and we felt that was a way to help providers, just give them one more tool to help decide which tool should I look at, which one should I be considering. Anything you can say about the conference in the Top 20?
It's a great avenue for a vendor. I mean, part of what we're doing is acting as a filter, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, you are considered now the champion if the advisory board so chooses. And a lot of vendors interact with us because of best in class. That's where our fully rated vendors.
Right.
That's the sort of the honor that they're seeking, and you can make much better connections that way than some of these larger conferences.
Well, great. Well, thanks, Stephen, for your input, for your insights. Thanks everyone for joining the podcast today. We had a great discussion about emerging technology in healthcare. If you're in healthcare, you know that there's dozens and dozens of new solutions every year. Our goal is to try to separate the fact from the fiction, let you know what's real, what's not, what can make a difference in your organization, what you should be looking at. So we're always on the search for new vendors that want to work with us, so that we can measure their solution and let the healthcare market know what's real and what's not. So thanks again for joining us. Check out the KLAS and Bain report that was co-published. It's available on the Bain & Company website. Also check out the Digital Health Investment Symposium, see if that's a conference you would be interested in attending. Reach out to Stephen if that's the case. And thanks again for joining us, and tune in for the next episode.